Golly, it's only been a few hours since I went home.
The recording started.
Good.
Yeah, you know, I've never been to one. I kind of want to see how it works.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, am I in for a rude awakening? Should I be careful what I wish for?
Always.
Okay, I guess at 6 o'clock, meeting will come to order.
Okay, at 6 o'clock, the meeting will come to order. Thank you. The meeting of the Ojai Appeals Board will be called to order on today, February the 25th, here at the City Council Chambers, the Ojai. I guess our roll call. Is that right?
Roll. Ulrich.
Present.
Hilgers.
Here.
Farmer.
Here.
Daddy.
Here.
Hanson.
Yeah, Bob, would you like to lead us to the
Sure.
Pledge of Allegiance?
Join me in the pledge to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I think the first thing on the agenda is public the swearing in, the oath to our new board member, William Ulrich.
It's my understanding I'm to read this oath or affirmation of allegiance for public officers or employees. The execution of this oath is required by Article 20, Section 3 of the Constitution of the State of California. I, William Ulrich, do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Excuse me.
I so swear.
Could you speak a little louder? It's tough to hear you from here.
Okay. Okay, well, yes. For the future, I will.
Thank you.
Congratulations and thank you
Congratulations. Good to have you on board.
for volunteering.
Right.
You might want to acknowledge Dave.
For those of that, this is Dale Hanson, our other board member here, so does she need to? Okay. I guess the next thing on the item is a selection of a chair and a vice chair.
You open the nomination. Would anybody like to nominate someone?
Okay. Nominations are now open for,
I nominate Bob Daddy as the chair of the Building Appeals Board.
I second
Tough hearing
that.
you folks. I have hearing aids and it's really tough. If you stand this far from the microphone,
Sorry about that. I nominate Bob Daddy as the chair of the Building Appeals Board. Is that good?
that's really nice.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I second that motion.
Is there any other nominations?
Is there any other nominations before us?
Okay, now we need a motion. Move that Bob Daddy or Robert Daddy is the chair. So we need a
Okay.
motion.
I make a motion that Bob Daddy is the chair of the Building Appeals Board.
And I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now you go to nominations for vice chair.
All right, nominations are now open for vice chair.
I nominate Tom Farmer.
I second.
So make the motion.
I make a motion that Tom Farmer is the vice chair of the Building Appeals Board.
You want to second the motion?
And I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Appreciate it. That's nice.
You can't escape.
I guess the next thing on the agenda is public communications, and I'll read it. The public communications item is for members of the public to address the Building Appeals Board on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the board and will generally be referred to staff and or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action on non-agendized items can be taken at this meeting.
Anyone from the public wishing to speak on any subject that's not on the agenda, anything at all?
You can turn the time over to Bob to conduct the rest of the meeting.
All right, I now turn the meeting over to Bob, our new chairman.
Thank you. And then I'm going to ask for some help in running through this discussion. It's come to the attention of a number of us that...
Do the consent and approve the minutes first?
Yes, okay.
Thanks.
Item 1, minutes of the Building Appeals Board from October 29th. Recommendation is to approve as submitted. Do we have any corrections or any objections to that? If none, request a motion.
Yeah, I move that we accept the minutes as approved.
Second?
Ulrich?
Aye.
Abstain, actually?
Excuse me, abstain.
Okay, thank you. Hilgers?
Yes.
Daddy?
Yes.
Farmer?
Yes.
Hanson? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, discussion items. And so, for my clarity, I'd like to know, and I've seen this done a number of times before, I need to know what the ability of the chair to take items out of order are, and who would be my counsel and reference for that.
It's at your discretion.
It's at my discretion. Then what I'd like to know is who on item 5 will be giving us the information on item 5. Who is our support staff that will be doing that? Staff? Who?
So, yeah, I'd be glad to answer any questions. What, the item on the agenda is the Brown Act,
Item 5, yes.
item 5. And the city attorney, or actually the interim assistant city attorney, drafted a memo to the Planning Commission explaining some of the provisions of the Brown Act, and we've provided that to you. Those provisions apply to this board just as they do to the commission.
Okay. I have a specific item issue target. And I've seen this a number of times, and I've been confused and dazed with all of the different processes we go through. And I went back and I looked at that and I reread it. I try to read everything 3 or 4 times before I come so I can memorize it. What I specifically want to find out, and I'm comfortable with, is recusal. I have seen a number of issues where people have discussed after the fact that, well, maybe that since the guy was the contractor on the project in question before the Planning Commission, he should have recused himself for the architect and didn't. And it's not the Planning Commission. I'm not picking on anybody. But I see things, and I'm just wondering where we get into a conflict. And so, I mean, I guess I'm guilty at one time or another of having like 3 or 4 members of the council insured. And so just because it's a business transaction, is that going to, where do the conflicts come in?
Well,
if you're an applicant for a second unit, or have a second unit, or have real estate, or it's even been discussed, I know that Dale has told me she's felt uncomfortable at times because there has been things, well, you're a realtor, how can you be talking about second unit? So if you could hit on that and really give us some strong guidelines, because my most important thing is to stay within the rules and stay within the guidelines. I want to make sure we don't do anything inadvertent.
Well, yeah, first of all, my disclaimer, I'm not an attorney, and if you ever have a question on a specific conflict, you may speak to the city attorney and get the city attorney's advice as to whether that specific set of circumstances constitutes a conflict. When the city attorney gives advice, it's only advice. under the law, you're responsible yourself for not participating in decisions that have a financial impact on yourself. And so as distinguished from the Brown Act, the conflict of interest laws are a separate set of laws. The Brown Act has more to do with open meetings, with not having business conducted and closed, outside the public, and that kind of thing. But with conflicts of interest, what they're looking for is a situation where you would benefit financially, usually from the vote. We are scheduling ethics training for the council and the commissions. I don't recall the date, but we will get you the information on that. And the purpose of that is to have an attorney present to give you a briefing on conflicts of interest and other ethics matters, so that you don't step over the line during the course of your activities.
Okay, thank you. I did not know that was the difference, the key difference in that. Okay, I'll try to speak loud.
Thank you.
I guess we're going to go to discussion item 2, which is going to be Title IX, Chapter 15, vacant property maintenance, security, and registration recommendations.
Why don't I just let me give a brief introduction, and then Mr. Stewart can also help with this. Recently, the City Council has given code enforcement, including vacant building enforcement, a high priority, and has given the staff more resources to deal with those issues. And so one of the first steps is to have our city attorney take a look at the rules that we have on the books right now as far as vacant buildings are concerned, and to make sure that they're workable and effective. And so the main input that I think is being requested from the Building Appeals Board is really where you would like to go, what your vision is for these vacant properties. And we'll bring that back to the city attorney, and he'll develop language based around those goals, which then in turn can be brought back for your further review.
Okay. Dale, would you like to start? Do you have any items or thoughts on the vacant buildings?
Sorry. I do know there are some vacant and not so pleasant looking buildings in Ojai. Of course, the one that comes to mind first of all is the bowling alley. And it seems, they've been sitting there for how many years vacant and not looking real nice right on our front street. So I would like to see that addressed. The other one would be, is it the Jim Miller property across the street from Seafresh? Yeah, that's very close to the heart of town. That one should certainly, I know there was someone planning to go in there, but I understand that didn't work out. Am I correct on that or no? I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, there have been proposals on that. Rather than discussing particular parcels, although it's good to point out particular parcels, but that gives us an understanding. Part of what I think he needs to know is what would you like done with vacant buildings? For example, I've heard on the bowling alley that the chain link fence is an unacceptable appearance. So what kind of appearance would be more acceptable and, be what you'd like to see happen through this process?
Well, what I'd like to see happen there is for someone to buy it and fix it up and do something with it. And she's been offered full price offers on that building and either not responded or turned them down. As far as the building across the street from Seafresh, at the very least, if they'd fix up the facade of that, and that's really all there is to it, is a facade. I don't think there's much else to the building, but if they'd at least paint that and make it look nicer, that would be a big help.
Put an awning on it.
Or, yeah, anything on that front part would be helpful. And they shouldn't be allowed to sit there that long and look that way right in the heart of town. I think that, I'm not sure what we do about that. I'd hate to be too punitive with the owners, but sometimes they're being blatant about their inactivity and the way they make the town look.
Tom?
Oh.
Yeah, is that on? I'm referring to, on the ordinance 811, the code regarding vacant property, section 91511, item C, it says fencing shall be permitted, but only with the consent of and under the direction of the director, no chain link fence or plastic fencing shall be permitted. Then you go into D, if the property is owned by a corporation and or out of the area beneficiary or trustee or owner, a local property management company shall be contracted to perform weekly inspections. And is this being adhered to? I mean, who's enforcing this?
Well, I think that's the issue, is that it really hasn't been enforced recently, and I think the council would like to see this in other codes enforced. So if your goal is to see those provisions enforced, that's good information.
I'd kind of like to interrupt for a second. We're new. I just got here. We just had a turnover, and I failed to introduce. We have. Would you like to step up to the podium? We have a new partner here in Ojai. We have somebody working with us. If you'd like to tell everybody your name and what you'd like to say and what you're going to do, we'd appreciate that.
I'm Vince Parker. I'm presently up there at Denison Park and doing park host up there. And I come down here during the days to do code enforcement or code compliance. And that's where we're going to try to look at to get them to comply, not try to force them into it. Let them be happy about their community, let them feel strong about it, and give them a reason why they need to comply to those codes. And as it builds up, they get to go and see the results of it, then everybody starts doing the same thing, and everybody gets in the same motion. But it's just going to take a process of doing that. It just seems that sounds that at this point now that you need to make a decision on where you're going to go with this. So as to where you're going to put a level as to following through with whatever the program you're going to put in place. Because if you don't follow through with it, the program's not going to work for you.
Well, what do you mean by follow through? Are you talking about fining them on a daily basis, or?
Well, that would be something you'd have to figure out how you want to implement it, and how you think your people or the community here will accept it.
Mm-hmm.
You mean, you don't want to, just, they've been here for a long time. A lot of them have been here for a long, long time, and I'm sure a lot of them don't even know a lot of the codes. So maybe a lot of, making them understand them, let them know that those codes have been there.
I think they know it. Neither of those two owners on this particular property is.
Well, I'm not going that way with it.
No.
I'm just going, I'm sure you can just check it out as you're going through town, that there is a lot of people that don't understand it.
Right.
And it's just because it hasn't been enforced, and certain entities have got to do what they've got to do, and it's just because it's been transformed in different ways. It just needs
And
to
I
be
didn't want you to get into that kind of specificity. I just kind of wanted an introduction.
Well, that's the bottom line, is
Right.
how you want to implement this program, and I'm here to do it diligently and trying to make it diplomatic for everybody, to make it work for everybody.
And I hope that you have the time to go to some different organizations, different meetings. I hope we can get you up to Rotary. I hope we can get you to the real estate board. I hope we can, get some information out that's accurate information. And I think that will help everybody. I think the majority of our code compliance rules in residential areas are just because people really aren't informed of what they are, what the stipulations are. They look for some things, or maybe they really don't, or they ask somebody, and then all of a sudden, boom, you got somebody with a great big fence in the 40-foot front easement, where the restriction where they can't be. So, I think most of our things, the majority of the things are going to be simple. I think that once they understand that, geez, hey, this is the rule and this is where it's going, we're going to find that. But what I'm uncomfortable about and unhappy then is the next process. So when you have somebody that's got a red tag order and you've got stop work orders and they're working 24 hours a day and on the weekends, which they can't do, at a certain point in time, they need to be referred to one of our legal people to up this. Rob?
Yeah, I might want to share some background. So in creating Mr. Parker's job, The city council wants us to be more proactive, so a lot of his time will be spent out in the field on patrol, looking for violations. He'll be working in the evening times and on the weekends as well as on the weekdays, throughout a schedule of 30 hours per week. And the building official and the city attorney and the community development director are all participating in training and supervising him with the goal of achieving the objectives you've described.
And I would hope that we can get our auxiliary to assist, because since they're out and around and they're in every street and they see everything, I would like us to see us come up with a different set of instructions that we have up on the front, to where we put down something pretty simple, benign, Ojai community standards, and we just explain that construction work on the weekends not prohibited. You can't start work before 7. You can't have noise after 6, and what the certain limits are, and not say that this is just a wham. So when we have the auxiliary driving around, and hey, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, they're taking a roof off a store, or the roof off the garage behind my house. It's an easy way to let people know that we have different rules here, and a different way of life, and a different standard. Because a lot of the people that get engaged in this really don't understand, being from different areas, what's going on. They know what the standard was where they were. And you wanted to get up early in Pacoima and get your work done before 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning so you could get in. I'm kidding. So with that, Wendy, what issues do you have on the code enforcement? Thank you very much. Look forward to working with you.
I'm just a little confused if this has been in the code section for a year and a half or 2 years or whatever. Was it not supposed to be enforced up to a date certain, or because
it's actually older than that. I think it goes back to 2010 if you look at the effective date of the ordinance.
Okay.
And there was some activity on it back then, and I think that other priorities have kind of overwhelmed it.
Right.
And the main problem has always been lack of resources. So with the new emphasis on this, we now have more resources to actually enforce it.
Right.
And the point is to make sure that we're enforcing what we want to enforce.
Right. Great. I think it's amazing how much is in it. I mean, you can stand in front of a property that you see is in a terrible condition and go through this, and I couldn't possibly think of one more thing you could add. It's amazing. So enforcement is the key, as with everything. And that gets to be depressing if you just keep talking about things, but there is no enforcement, and that applies to all of the other problems we're having too. So that'll be wonderful. Glad you're here.
Mr. Ulrich.
Thank you, Chair Debbie. It appears in my review of my chapter 15.
Pull that right. Pull it up. Yeah, there you, right in front.
How's this?
There we go.
All right. It appears my review of chapter 15 produced the following observations. Section 915.03, owner responsibilities. No person, corporation, or other entity shall allow a building designed for human use or occupancy that is subject to this chapter to stand vacant for more than 90 days. That's Section A. Section B says the owner of any boarded building, whether boarded by voluntary action of the owner or as a result of enforcement activity by the city, shall cause the boarded building to be rehabilitated for occupancy within 90 days after the building is boarded. So the two buildings that we've referenced are obviously severely out of compliance with that. Now, another section indicates there's supposed to be a monitoring program that's supposed to be conducted by the city and by the director. And the director is identified as this director of the Community Development Department in the first section of definitions, 915.02. But most importantly, 915.07, the monitoring program Departmental responsibility and fees. A, the authority, the director shall be responsible for administering a program for identifying and monitoring the maintenance of all vacant buildings in the city. The program shall be documented and regularly updated. And this is the important part. The program shall be available for public review. So, and then it goes through to identify buildings which become vacant, order vacant buildings which are open and accessible to be secured against unlawful entry, initiate proceedings against the owner of any vacant or dangerous buildings, prepare a written abatement plan for all vacant buildings, maintain surveillance over vacant buildings, and establish and enforce rules and regulations for the implementation and compliance. So, from a practical perspective, I realize that there are restrictions as far as resources to this available to the city, but it also seems to me that if you've adopted, for every portion of the state code that's adopted and it becomes part of the city code, if you're not, as the city, as the authority, not enforcing it, then you are out of compliance with your own code, which is not a condition that I think any city wants to be. And I don't think we have so many vacant buildings that this is an egregious burden on anything at this point. And obviously, usually you start with the ones that are the most visible and perhaps are influencing other, that are most visible to people in the community. I was also going to comment on the reference to security requirements and how chain link fencing and plastic fencing is specifically prohibited. And then section 915.10, maintenance requirements. It's rather detailed regarding that maintenance requirements, which the buildings that we were referenced and perhaps a couple of other buildings clearly do not, they fall quite short of that. And then I would also reference 915.12, the abatement plan, which is to be generated by the director. And that the copy of said abatement plan shall be served on the owner of each vacant building, and each owner shall be notified that he, she, or it has 90 days in which to obtain any necessary or required building or other permits. So, and then finally, section 915.13, additional authority. That goes to support that the director or his or her designee shall have the authority to require the beneficiary trustee owner of the property affected by this section to implement additional maintenance and or security measures, including but not limited to securing any, all door, window, or other openings, installing additional security lighting which may be required, increasing on-site inspection frequency, employment of an on-site security guard, or other measures as may be reasonably required to arrest the decline of the property. At least one of these properties is adjacent to this Unified School District headquarters and our continuation high school. So from a practical perspective, I think that's a significant issue before the city.
Rob, huge list, lots of things to do, lots of things to catch up on. I would rather start with something that's doable and meaningful. And one of the concerns I'm having is that we appear to be adding more, not less. So I'm wondering, in our building permit process, it's kind of distressing to see us demolish a building and then have it set like Il Gardino, and now we got one more giant, ugly building. And then we have somebody who, we're going to fix this with complete streets, hopefully by getting some slow-down traffic calming up at the east end of the Ojai Avenue, where we have somebody speeding and it takes out a small restaurant. And they got a little tape across there, and they've got a couple of 2x4s, and that thing's not safe. And so I don't know what actual marshal authority that we have to fix some of these things. But one of my concerns is, don't we have the ability to require completion bonds, performance bonds, demo bonds? Because we're sitting here now, and it's been how many months? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. Il Gardeno's been done, and it gets demolished, and we have this thing in here that says you shall not have a construction fence up. And what have we got there? We have a construction fence. We have no construction. I doubt that there's a permit issued. And so now what we've done is we've created this barricade around this building that we say you can't have. The other issue I would have is we haven't regularly tagged all the buildings. I mean, we don't have a property management to say, hey, if there's water coming out of the building, or if we got a problem with the building, or if we have graffiti all over the building, we really don't have that notification that says, call Holly Humphreys at, Ojai Property Management or something like that. So they're not there. So if something goes awry with these things, we have out of town, out of area, out of state owners. The bowling alley is owned by a lady in Mater, Louisiana. So, that's probably as far out as you can get. And I came to the council about 10 weeks ago and said, hey, they got a giant sign, which kind of disturbs me that they should be able to put a giant sign. I mean, a giant sign. And that giant sign was graffitied 3 days after it went up. And I don't know if we have the will to go ahead and enforce this, or we just don't have the money. But as I look in here, there's a fee. And if we don't have the money, then we need to adjust a fee, divide it into those properties, figure out what that's going to cost, and we need to come up with a monthly maintenance fee. And if that monthly maintenance fee is X amount of money to get them to move, then we need to move. If they want to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to get a permit, 10 years to get a permit, we've had 10 years, let them pay for 10 years. I don't believe the community deserves to have the face of Ojai Avenue. I mean, we got stuff in the back. But the face of Ojai Avenue, as you drive into the town, have these sorry examples of what our community is. It's not appealing. It's not pleasant. So, again, to work with you folks, I understand, to go from 0 to light speed, you got to build a rocket ship. It takes a little bit of time to go, and it's going to take a lot of questions. We're going to have to format and put questions to the council, ask them what their pleasure is. I mean, is the council willing to go 10 cents a square foot per month? I don't know. We certainly don't, you could ask for $1, but I mean, that's some astronomical money. I'm pretty sure that would get somebody to get the let out really quick. I don't know that they have a right to have a for sale sign that's going to be there forever when they truly have no intent to sell and they won't accept an offer. How would we be denying their right to not have a graffitied for sale sign if they continue to refuse 100% offers? I don't see where anybody's being harmed. But then again, I too am not an attorney. So I kind of want to work with you on a few of these things. I want to see what we can do to take a look at the biggest problems we have, see which ones we can quickly get done, find out how we coordinate and correlate this stuff, and how we prevent people from tearing down perfectly good buildings before they have a permit in their hand. I don't want to add any more garbage to what we got. So I don't know how that process works, and I don't know if they have a time limit. But we're going to be coming up on 180 days, which seems to be our statute, which is, I think it's called significant progress. And I haven't seen that in some areas. So, Mr. Stewart, I see you reaching for that microphone, and you're 20 answers behind, so I better stop now.
Thank you, Chair. I think the goal that staff is reaching out to the commission is to provide some general direction that we can then format some possible changes to the code and submit those for consideration by the city council. In my short tenure here, we've actually done some abatement processes with this ordinance. What comes back is that the property owners feel that this is extremely onerous, and we are then forced to go some other direction via the violation penalty process to gain enforcement. So really, my simple question to the board this evening is do you see these as fair regulations for the city of Ojai as far as implementing, or do you think they need to be stiffer, maybe a higher level of requirements, or do you feel that there are some areas that we can reduce to hopefully gain more what I refer to as voluntary compliance? So that is really the first question. How we go about that, all of these elements that you brought forward tonight are things that we can do research on and evaluate to see if we can implement that if we want to go to a more restrictive enforcement. But we're trying to get the sense of the community here through you of whether this meets the reasonable test for this type of a ordinance. And I can just share that we've had a lot of pushback on this particular ordinance when we have implemented that, to the point where we would have to do a legal enforcement action to enforce these things. So that's really what we're looking for before we move into this next step. Do you feel that this is reasonable? If you do, we'll pass that on to the city council. If you think it is too onerous, what can we change to make it less onerous? Or if you don't think it's restrictive enough, what can we incorporate to make it more restrictive?
Let me start with the first one, because what you've done, yes, excuse me, Mayor Laura.
Thank you, Chair Daddy and rest of the board members. Thank you. Just a point of clarity, I just want to state that when we were talking about a code compliance officer, we stressed, and I remember Mayor Strobel was here at the time, we understood that it was important for the city to have a code enforcer, to be here and start looking at all our codes so we could start being proactive. I think that's been already an issue that's been clarified at the council. We want him, or her, him, whoever it was. Second thing that we stated at that meeting is that we wanted the first year to be more about education. We wanted the code enforcer to be out and proactive, but also educate the community. We didn't want to go straight and enforce all our codes when we haven't been doing so. So I think in general, I love the fee idea. I think that's a great idea. The fact that there's some maintenance in the code for this vacant ordinance that we have is a good start. And I just wanted to make sure it's a fair question by Mr. Stewart about the range of ideas, but as a council member, I think we already made some clear decisions of kind of where we want to direct the code enforcer. So I don't want to go too much into enforcing straight the code and at the same time leaving it voluntarily compliance. I don't think those two extremes we're looking for. We're looking for something proactive now. I agree, the list is just getting bigger. Now let's deal with what the list is, and let's make sure that the future, that right now, we're not creating anything that's getting even bigger. So we want to make sure and that's a fair assessment by Chair Daddy. So I just wanted a point of clarity. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And Mr. Stewart, to answer you, you gave me 3 different plates, and the answer is yes to each one. So let's try to take a couple, and then let's get everybody to get some input. If we're going to have the fee, before I tell you what I'd like to do, I'd like to know what the fee is going to be. And before, and it's not just the fee, let's go ahead and close the generalities, and let's put in specifics. So we still have 180-day significant work, at least for people that have pulled permits. I think that we need to put dates certain. I think we need to put some things that we notice the people, we educate them, we tell them some changes, we actually tell them the specifications of those changes, and then we tell them the implementation date. And then at such time, I hope that the council has come back and modified the dates that we would like this thing to start, and modified to what degree they would like to have it start, and take a look at the fees and figure out what they're going to do if we don't get compliance. There's really no alternative to keep, unless we just keep adding. And I would think that we act at their, we represent the people, and we work for the council, and we act at their direction. And what is going to get me tuned or turned, again, is what kind of a fee after you've had, well, I can only go back 19 and a half years. When you've had a vacant building for 19 and a half years, I don't think this is a sudden and unexpected action. It really doesn't seem to be. When they put up the chain link fence 10 years ago, it wasn't a sudden action. And so I think we need to put it in here. We need to have some fairness. We need to put in what we're looking at first. We need to figure out those items that we feel are the most egregious. I hate that fence. And I don't want all 19 of our campers, full-time residents, camping in there. And they're probably trying to do that, and we don't want to have other vagrancy and other issues in there, and dumping issues. But there's got to be some way to move these things along, and there's got to be some way to stop adding. So with that, if we can come up, and I don't know how we do it, but we need to come up with a number of items that we need to mark up and stipulate and figure out what is fair, get our best act together, and make a recommendation and see what the council, and I think we've been discussing the fact that it's really time to do this, and I think everybody understands that, and I think you just pick a date, you fill in all the individual items, and you take the vagueness out of each one of these and recommend that we enforce. But, Ms. Hanson.
I think I read it somewhere in here, and I can't find it, and I don't remember exactly, but how is a fee imposed? Is it a lien on the property? I mean, how do we impose such a fee?
It results in a lien, I believe.
A lien on the property, so when they go to sell it or do whatever?
Cloud the title,
It clouds the title. Yeah, is that correct, staff, sir?
My understanding is that we would have to go through some other administrative remedy process to assess a fee. That's one element that we've asked the city attorney to do some more research on. The enforcement provisions actually refer back in section 915.17 back to Title I, Chapter 6, which is our general enforcement elements.
Mhm.
So for us to take an enforcement action beyond a voluntary, yes, I will pay the fee, yes, I will remove the chain link fence, we'll have to take some kind of a action under Title I, Chapter 6.
So you said that you got some pushback from the owners of the properties when you approached them about their vacant property. You said you got pushback? I mean, they're saying that we should...
I don't want to really speak specific properties.
Mhm.
I'm talking in general terms.
Mhm.
But in general terms, when we have implemented this ordinance on various pieces of property here in the city, the pushback is that they feel this is onerous. And that's one of my questions to you. Do we feel that this is onerous or not? Or do we enforce this and move on to the next actions that we would need to take? And as the mayor has indicated, that always our first goal in any kind of an enforcement action is to get voluntary compliance. We want to work with the citizens of Ojai. We want to explain the rules to them. We want them to understand the rules, and we want them to abide by those rules.
we treat them with a great deal of civility in how we approach that. And I think that's what Vince was trying to communicate to you. But there comes a time when, after discussions and clarification and a point of understanding, we need to move on to the next step, and that's an enforcement action.
Right.
And so, back to the point, if the community feels that this is the way it's written is what the community standard should be, then we pass that on to the city council and we move forward with that. But if we need some tweaking, this is an excellent time to do that before we take the next step.
Before we do that, have we designated and noticed? So do we have a designation, a list, and have each of these properties been noticed with a return receipt request so we know that they have gotten a designation saying, we have an ordinance and here's what's going on, and we want to let them know. I don't want somebody to come barging in here and say, hey, I never got noticed. I don't know what you're doing. I know we've used this ordinance before, and that was on Franklin and Montgomery with the Chevrolet property, and that is now a vacant corner lot. And is this the same enforcement that we have on the books today? Has this been changed since that last enforcement action? Because if it was good enough to do that then, I'm kind of wondering what would be different and why it wouldn't be effective today.
Chair, I really don't want to speak to given pieces of property because we are in process of that. But I can assure you that the ones that I've been involved in clearly have received notification, and I've had communication back with them knowing that they've received communication.
Yeah, Steve, would there be any, and I'm not an attorney, but what about if somebody signed a notice to perform? Something, signed agreement that they're agreeing to do this within a certain amount of time. It seemed like then you'd have a little bit more legality to fall back, and then if you did lien their property or cloud the title, again, I'm not an attorney, it would just seem like that if you had them sign a document.
That's clearly an avenue we could incorporate into the ordinance if you'd like to recommend that, and the council concurred with that. There again, it's difficult to get them to do that. The city's normal action is that we go through a legal process with action. We utilize administrative remedies situations where we do an enforcement action. There is a penalty involved in that. It can be up to $1,000 a day. And that there's a hearing officer that hears that, makes a determination of that, and then once that determination is made, what that fee is going to be, the city council then would have to take action to lien that property to get that fee. So we have mechanisms in place to do these various actions, but it's just. It is the community standard, and that's kind of what we're trying to come up with. What is the community standard, and is this? Do you as the Building Board of Appeals think that this is a community standard that we want to enforce and implement? Mm-hmm. And of course we can work out the details depending on what direction we get.
Dale?
So if we took case by case, and we would decide how it would be to fix up some buildings so it was presentable, and sort of do what Tom suggested and say, this is what we would like you to do within this period of time, and if you don't, then the city will do it and bill you for it. And then in the process, that would become a fee if they didn't pay it. But we're giving them options and choices and timelines to do it in. And it seems to me that that would not be so difficult to ask of a person, particularly if they don't perform and we perform for them, we have a right to bill them.
That's basically a mechanism under state laws called a receivership, where we give them notice of substandard conditions. We give them a certain time frame to comply with those standards. If they fail to comply, then we go to court. We ask the court to turn this property over to a third party called a receiver to actually make those improvements. Once those improvements are made, then the property owner has the ability to pay for those costs in administrative and city costs. And if they fail to do that, then the court gives them authority to sell that property to get their funds back.
That's
So
pretty heavy-handed.
there is a mechanism already in place to do that. But as you can see by my description, that becomes quite
Yeah, that's pretty
drastic,
heavy-handed, yeah.
in that. And it's really a community standard. Since I've been here, we've had to utilize that program on one of our buildings here in town that we couldn't get compliance on, and we tried extremely hard. So it has been done in our community, but it's not something that we do very often, nor do we want to. But there is mechanisms under the law of how we approach like that. The problem comes is if the city goes in and does work with city resources or with a contractor, then there's always potential for litigation. That's why we need to go through the court system to
I
get
see.
that approved.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, I want to start down on your end and come by, and let's start picking some of these off or we'll never get this done. How many days after notification is a reasonable time for somebody to come in and assess the fact that they're non-compliant and put the sign out, put the referral sign out, do some of these things that appear to be fairly minor in cost, remove fences, clean up trash, clean up debris, get some of these things done? What's your estimation should be the outside time frame to get this accomplished?
It appears to me that chapter 15 defines that in several places as 90 days.
Hey, what's your opinion?
90 days is generous. I'm saying that from the perspective of at last night's city council meeting, I heard at least 3 council persons indicate that they were frustrated by the current state of affairs and wanted to see some implementation of enforcement of some of the ordinances that the city has not been enforcing. And this is already 4 years old. So from a practical perspective, most of the properties that were being tangentially referenced this evening have been in their abandoned or a vacant condition for at least the duration of the existence of this adoption. 4 years is a long time already.
Wendy Hilgers, time frame?
No, that, based upon what Bill just said, I totally agree. I think making, as we've said about so many other things, making a more simple statement, maybe, rather than this basic things that everybody could agree with when you let a piece of property go, and get started on that, introduce that to the person, get them started thinking about it. I can't imagine somebody with a derelict piece of property would himself want to be living next to that. They have to have some conscience about it, but to bring it to their table and let them look at that. But everything in here is critical, and getting pushback. That's just human nature, I think. I mean, we all feel that way in some respects, but they have to abide by the code. So 90 days, I agree.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm okay with the 90 days. I'm also, I would seem like that, I think we have after 90 days, somebody has to monitor this every 30 days. Is that true? Is that right?
There's an ongoing, I believe there's an ongoing inspection program to make sure it's being monitored on it, if they actually participate with the program, if we can get them to that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I'm fine with 90 days.
Dale?
Yeah, I'm fine with 90 days. That's 90 days after they've been notified.
Yes, we need to have that return receipt request. We need to have that receipt in the file.
So we know they
We
got
wanna-
it.
Would Councilman Wyrick step up, please?
Public hearing, or?
Yeah, no, this is going to be, we're here to do the
I want to make a
people's,
couple
to do the
comments
people's
on
work.
just what everyone's talking about here. And I learned a lot just listening here, and then I read it. There are two fees. There's a registration fee, which is tied to the cost of implementing the ordinance. And it seems to me that the abatement plan, the cost of the abatement plan could be tied directly to the registration fee. And I'm just standing here saying, I would urge the appeals board to, I'm supposed to address you, would urge, maybe request of staff to come up with an estimate of what a cost of developing abatement plans would be, and then tie that to the registration fee that's supposed to be there for every single vacant building. And the registration fee cost recovery is in the administrative penalties part that Mr. Stewart talked to, but then there's a second fee, which is the monitoring fee. And that is completely distinct, and I noticed that the code specifically allows for the monitoring fee to be collected by city council may order that the fee be specially assessed against the property involved. If the city council orders that the fee be specially assessed against the property, it shall confirm the assessment, and thereafter said assessment may be collected at the same time in the same manner as ordinary real estate property taxes. So we've got two fees, two different means of recovery. One, it seems to me, would be reasonable to correlate it directly with the cost of doing the abatement plans, and the other to recover the cost of the monitoring, possibly providing the resources at zero net cost to the general fund. I'm just saying that I'd be really interested after hearing the legal review about maybe looking at a fee study to be brought to council with respect to that registration fee maybe tied to cover the cost of the abatement plans.
And since
Thank
you've
you.
opened that up, Councilman Wyrick, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Will we be able to have that collected through the property taxes in the county, much like the sewer fee is collected directly by the county?
I just read the code.
Rob, you have any idea? Can we have the
How
county
that works
assist
is
that?
that we have to hold a public hearing in front of the city council.
Right.
They have got to actually assess that fee. There is an appeal process that the owner can go through.
Right, correct. On the abatement plan as well.
And on the abatement plan as well.
Right.
Very similar to that.
And I'm thinking there's, in other words, if the attorney says, reviews this and it's legal, we may have the resources we need with proper fee proposals, and then the other thing is to kind of subtly change the calculus. We want it to be more expensive to neglect the properties than to develop them. That's the whole point of the ordinance, I think. So I just wanted to make those comments just to wrap around. I'm curious as to whether or not, in fact, we may have this covered in terms of resources. If
Thank
the
you.
attorney says it's okay.
Rob, this is a 4-year-old ordinance now, I guess. December 2010. Have we collected a fee, a monitoring fee, a registration fee? Have we actually assessed anybody a fee? Have we sent them notice that fees are due, like you're 4 years behind on the registration for the building? Have we done any of that?
In the past, we've actually collected the registration and some of the monitoring fees, but with some of our current requests, we haven't. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Mr. Ulrich.
I'd like to make 3 observations. One is somewhere along in here, we're going to, in the implementation of this program, the properties will have to be identified. And the monitoring program, as I referenced in my earlier comments, specifically provides in section 915.07 that the program shall be available for public review. So that means this, I can't speak specifically about properties, I think is addressed by this chapter that yes, we can speak specifically about properties because the concept is this is a blight to the community. In reference to Councilman Wyrick's comments, actually there is a third fee, which is not a fee, it's a violation and penalty. That's section 915.17, which states, violations of this chapter shall be treated as a strict liability offense regardless of intent. Any person, firm, or corporation that violates any portion of this section shall be subject to prosecution and/or administrative enforcement under, as Mr. Stewart referenced, Title I, Chapter 6 of the Code. So I think this provides for all sorts of enforcement. It provides for fees that will support the enforcement, and it pretty much provides a framework with which to enforce the section. So I really don't understand at this point, absent any direction otherwise from the council, and we have received that direction. And further, I'd also like to point out that in section 915.14, referencing fees, the fee for registering a vacant property shall be set by resolution of the city council. So really, the first 2 fees that Councilman Wyrick referenced have to be established by the city council. And I would imagine that that would be either a general across the board, or it might be specific to particular properties depending upon their size, because the scope of enforcement may be larger, it's reasonable to assume, for a larger property and lesser for a lesser property. But notwithstanding, you've got registration, you've got monitoring, and then you have violation and penalties. So I think it's already there. Thank you.
Mayor Laura, would you stand up for just a second?
Yes.
Maybe you can give us some counsel and advice. We're going to identify these issues and we're going to make recommendations. And we're going to make recommendations to the council. And the council, the way I understand this is we need to make the recommendations, but you also need to make the fees.
Correct.
And you also need to put those in there. I've had a lot of trouble with some of the fees that we have. I take a look at a fair and balanced approach.
Uh-huh.
It's hard for me to have somebody stand before this appeal board and spend $500 to vet out an issue with the building code.
Mm-hmm.
When Golden State Water in prior years paid $550 and went in and encroached into the city. And I know this is off subject, but what we heard is if the insurance is exhausted by Golden State Water to repair the playhouse, and if they're telling us they have no current insurance today, what insurance do they have to go into our street tomorrow? And have we requested that insurance be upped or something, and give the city at least a little bit of encouragement that they have the ability and the insurability to get back into the street? And I apologize for digressing, but I had to get that out.
Uh-huh.
But again, the fees, I think that we need to take a look at this because that's a very broad scope. $500 to appear is tough. And when you set the fees, Again, I hope you do it on a square foot basis. I don't care if it's a dime a month. I don't care if it's a nickel a month. So if you got 40,000 feet, somebody's got 400 feet, proportionally, not literally, because it's still another file, it's still another category. Literally, the smaller people will be paying less, not more.
Yeah, and that's a great suggestion, and I would encourage that recommendation done and given to the city council. I think it is appropriate for you guys to recommend these type of fees, especially when it has to do with the building code and we're talking about vacant buildings, or I don't know what's going to happen to the Ojai Playhouse, but we do have to be careful in getting involved. I understand that, but we do also have to be conscious about what's going on, and we don't want another blight building, another vacant building right downtown. So I know it's a little off subject, but kind of isn't, because if you're looking into the future, that could be a possibility. So.
Well, and then my question would be, how soon before we add another blighted building if there are no funds to complete after demolition? I'm always very nervous about not enforcing a compliance bond.
And I definitely share your concern, because in the past, as obviously this ordinance has been in effect since 2010 in December, and we still have vacant buildings here. So it is, you could say, judging on our past, that we haven't followed up with our own ordinances. So right now, I agree with you. I think we need to set the guidelines and start, and I think Board Member Ulrich is correct in saying there is a framework here. Let's start working with it. Let's start implementing it. So I think having our buildings compliance officer here, I think that's part of the reason why we hired this compliance officer to start enforcing, and we would, at least personally talking for myself as a individual on the council, I would welcome that, and I would hope that you guys send those recommendations up to us.
Okay,
So,
thank you very much.
thank you.
Rob, so this thing doesn't last like forever, because we're not pyramid builders. How can we best, most effectively look through the rules, mark them up, get them ready to go, get written suggestions, ask who's in charge and what we do, and get these things back and forth as quickly as we can? Because in a month cycle, we're only cycling once a month. In a month cycle, this is going to be, we're going to have 5 more blighted buildings before we figure out what we can do about the first one. So what would you recommend? Would you recommend we sit here tonight? We will do that and go through each one of these and add all of our 2 cents and vet it? Or would it be best for us to go do homework and I'll get different little colored pens and pencils and write it out? What do you suggest we do?
So I think what you've done so far is actually very helpful. I don't think we are relying on the board to write language or to modify specific sections. What we want is your vision, and I think you've done a pretty good job in different ways of articulating what your vision is. So we can take that back to the city attorney, and he can review what we have in the way of language with that in mind, and then we can have something to bring back to you. So I'm, unless there's something that you feel is a big issue that we've missed, I think you've done a pretty good job already in giving direction.
Okay, so just to restate, and then I'm going to ask everybody to weigh in. I think the highest priority is that we need to come up with a time frame. We need to absolutely make sure that everybody has been notified and understands what this is going to do. We need to understand that we're not going to have fees can be applied. We're going to have a fee that said it's going to be a penny and nickel. It's going to be something each month per square foot. So when we say we're going to do these things, we have to have specificity with each one of those, with that notification, I guess, after council decides. And then what you do is you have an implementation date that you recommend, and it's been here for 4 years. The blight's been here for eons. and we're adding to it. And this isn't the town I want it to be. When I got here 19 and a half years ago, Rotary Park was blighted. People would drive in and throw couches out of the back of their pickup truck. I mean, that place was a dump. And we fixed up the Y, and it looks beautiful, and we got those great trolley stops, and we've got the Rotary Park now, and we've really made, it's a nice entrance, and it's a beautiful entrance. And what I'd like to see is it beautiful all the way through to Gridley. And so I think we can do that. So that's my thoughts. I'm going to start on the left with Dale. What are your thoughts about language, concise stipulation, other things that we need to add for fairness and for transparency?
Well, I like the idea of public input, and I guess maybe we're part of the public, so we're giving our input. But we have to identify the properties. I don't know that we have to do that, but they have to be identified. We have to notify the owners. We have to give them a list of things they have to do. I think landscaping, even just minimally, needs to be part of it. If it's something right on the business section of Ojai, that's really got to have at least the facade fixed up nicely. And of course, any health and safety issues that are there, it's got to be addressed. We have to give them the time limit, monitor the progress, excessive penalties for each month they're out of compliance, and make them do something. Is that too specific or not enough?
Perfect. Thank you. Tom?
Well, I echo what Dale had to say, but I think the most important thing is disclosing this to the property owners. You have to tell them what the consequences are and the ups and the downs on this. And I think it's important if somebody does live out of state, I don't know how you go about notifying them, whether it's a return receipt requested, or I think it's always good to meet face-to-face with somebody so they don't pull this convenient amnesia type thing. Well, I thought you said this. Having them sign some kind of a note, I guess from my background in banking, it was always beneficial when we approached somebody that we had a signed piece of paper before we would liquidate something or put a lien on, whatever. But I think it's really important to disclose to these people, these property owners, and exactly what we expect. I mean, it's been 4 years since Mayor Olson in December signed this ordinance, and we really haven't monitored it, or maybe we've monitored it, but we're looking at a couple of pieces of property here in Ojai that it's kind of the talk of the town of what's happening, and so. But anyway, I think disclosure is really you've got to communicate with these people. Thank you.
Wendy?
I think, again, the town has the reputation for non-enforcement of issues, and that's created a lot of problems that are pretty long-standing right now. And I think with all of the suggestions, notifying the owner, of course, is critical. But when the citizens can see one or two properties that really have made a change, that'll be wonderful. And I think that this could lead to that. So, thank you.
Mr. Ulrich?
I believe that there is, in this chapter, there are provisions for the means. I believe that within this chapter, there are provisions for the means of notification of the owner. And as well as it's referenced in, I believe, the definitions, as well as in, should it go to a lien, of how the lien is noticed. So from my perspective, I think this chapter, as adopted, as it exists in the community code, is entirely adequate.
So I guess, Sherry, we don't need a motion or resolution, do we? Or can I just give direction
that's fine, just direction is
Okay,
fine.
so I guess the direction, based on the consensus, is that staff go ahead, fill in the blanks, make the recommendation, ask the city council as to what time frame they see is tolerable and what they would prefer, and have them designate the 3 fee sections. And I would ask that they also do one other thing. I would ask that we get a cumulative list, get this list to council, put the designated zoning, what they're able to do, make it a little easy on them, and let them mull over what they think may be allowable. Now, we have the mob shop, it's a bike shop, it's Miners Oaks Bikes. They're not really a mob, I guess. And when Miners Oaks Bikes came in, that property was designated professional. It didn't stay professional very long. It went right to a bike shop. And so what I think we need to do is we need to look back, because we had somebody that wanted to move into the gas station on Del Norte. Well, you could do this, but you couldn't do a door. You could do that, you could do a bar. You couldn't do this, but you could sell that. And I think what we need to do is we need to go back and look at some of the zonings on some of these properties and see if that isn't partially responsible for some of these buildings not being put to good use. The property along Ojai Avenue is expensive, it's valuable, and yet I see it and it's dilapidated, and we have these things that we don't even look at. So we have Los Lagos, and next to Los Lagos is the old fire department building. And that place is owned by somebody I've known for 40 years. And it needs some help. We need to have some help. And so I think we need to help people, and we need to look. We modify zones and properties. We did that, I believe, on Pearl Street. So I would hope that the council would take an interest in looking at the zoning, and let's take a look at those that are blighted, and let's see if, in fact, the city's needs really coincide with what the actual zoning is. And those need to be done separately, because that's going to be way down, but I would like us to get the notification out, get the fees, and start it as soon as possible. We would encourage staff to expedite. Thank you. Okay, next item. And, wow, I don't know that I have the heart to get into the state model codes right now. But I guess that's what we're going to have to do. So, Mr. Stewart, how about giving us a warm-up?
Absolutely, Chair. We're bringing back to you just for general discussion tonight of whether we want to pursue the adoption of the 2013 state model codes, and whether you would like to make some recommendations on some possible amendments. There is limited ability to make changes to the state model codes, and they're listed in your report. We can only do it for climatic, geographical, or topographic conditions under state statute. So that's really the basic question. I know that there's been some interest in developing some amendments to the codes that make sense for topographic or climatic reasons here in our community, and whether we want to start down the road to start looking at that and implementing that is really the question tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stewart and I have talked about a few of these, and so I'll just blurt out a couple of things that I have concern with. I know Mr. Stewart has his other concerns, and we have a number of them that are the same concerns. If we take a look at where we are, we still have Class C building ordinance. which I think it doesn't make sense in the wildland interface. It means we can have shake roofs. We don't have a number of things that would be beneficial, I believe. Everybody needs to understand that the Mills Act and special landmarked buildings are exempted. So if we were to go ahead and adopt what Pasadena has done, which says if we have a big windstorm and 10% of your shake roof blows off in a single event, you cannot put Class C shake wood roof back on. Landmarked and Mills Act are exempted from that. That's a state rule. We can't overstep that. We have wiring, and we're going to get into this with the second unit non-compliant homes where we put in wiring. We have 2-wire systems, non-ground systems, knob and tube systems without fabric on them. We have old systems with very small amperage that may be inadequate. They've got fuses and fuse stats, which are just definitely a combustible issue, very hazardous. So we probably need to vet some of those things out individually and tailor them to Ojai because we have some pretty specific needs. I don't have an appetite for adopting international code or maintenance code or some of those other codes as an entire book. That's something I think we can look at as we start getting into the compliance where we're going to have these units come in and we're going to look at them and we're going to see some different things and go, yeah, well, maybe we need to do something different. So until we actually get into some and really see how good or how bad some of these things can be, I'd like to go slow with a couple of those things. We've had a lot of pushback on Appendix L and the fire sprinkler, so I really don't have the heart to readdress that and go back in on that thing. I think that thing is buried and it's done. I think there are some things that we have to look at as far as procedures, and if we're referring plans to the fire department, it was my understanding that they said they're not enforcing in the city any longer. If they couldn't enforce that, based on that tape, they weren't going to enforce anything. But again, we're going to need some guidelines and specificity on that. And so I'll let everybody else have to say what they have to say. But again, I think what we're talking about is getting back into this. Is that what we would be doing?
And that's really the discussion. When we're talking about the model codes, we're talking about the California Building Code, the California Residential Code, the California Plumbing Code, the California Mechanical Code, the California Electrical Code, the California Historic Building Code, and the California Existing Building Code. What we're not talking about is the adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code, which is not a state mandated code. And my recommendation is not bring that back. If the board would like to bring that back at some point, we can discuss that, but that's not what my recommendation here is tonight for you.
I thought, and it's been a number of years since we started, well, this says 2010, so it's been a number of years since we did this. I thought that when the state changed the code, that was it. It's their code, we're done, it's over, and it's adopted. I thought what we could do is, under no circumstances could we ever lessen the code. We could add to, again, for those 3 items that you specified. And so I'm really not understanding what we're doing, because I understand it's fiat. It is law. It is done. And I didn't know there was anything for us to actually physically do. Is that correct?
Well, let me just provide a little clarity. Clearly, that's the intent, is if we want to, for instance, your example, the current California Building Code and Residential Code only requires a Class C fire-rated roof. Okay. If for climatic conditions, clearly we can make findings of that, we can go to a higher standard roof. Whether that's a B or an A roof, that would be a point of discussion to have and then make a recommendation to the council. Once the council makes that into ordinance, we actually have to file with the State Building Standards Commission findings of that, on why we are amending the state code, and we would have to quote these various conditions, saying because of I'll use the roof one example, because of high winds in our regional area and hot and dry conditions, we feel that the California code is not adequate to provide health and life safety. Therefore, we're adopting a higher standard roofing requirement. Now, I don't want to get too involved in this tonight, unless you want me to, but the state of California does not adopt every provision that is in the base code, which is the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, the International the Uniform Plumbing Code, the Uniform Mechanical Code. They don't adopt every specific section in that particular code. So there is some provisions that I am not allowed to utilize in the state code. It reads in there, but there's a matrix in the front of every chapter of what is the enforceable provisions of that particular code. So just to give you an example, we were dealing with a existing building. We have some severe structural issues with that building, and there was some consideration of various structural elements within that building that could be possibly unsafe. Now, the engineer comes to me, who is doing the design on this, and says, I want to use this provision in the existing building code to design this standard. My problem is that we currently do not adopt that, nor does the State Building Standards Commission adopt that particular provision. So I'm having to work with him on how we can make findings to use appropriate provision. It would have been real nice to say, that's the city code, do it, okay? That's just one example of that. Most of the code that we read is adopted by the state, and it's not an issue. But every once in a while, there's a little nuance that would be nice to have the adopted set of codes. Okay, and this is statewide standard and countywide standard. We're not creating any new set of requirements, and this is the normal protocol.
And we've discussed over the last few years, what I don't want to see is adopting en masse. And while we adopt a few things that take care of our particular issues, we end up adopting a whole bunch of other things that I think is going to be things that at least I think I'm going to regret. So what we want to do, and we're just talking about what we're going to do. We're not going to go over every single item. We're not going to go over any items as far as I know, and figure out what we need to figure out and what I think is going to happen. And please add to and correct me. As the second unit compliance program comes on board, we're going to discover a lot of things. We have some things that are down here that say we would like adequate ventilation, we would like this, we would like this, and there's going to be some specificity. We're talking about paint, wiring, all kinds of things. So we're going to get some specificity out of here. And I would really think it would be easier to just adopt these things as they come. Again, I looked at this the last time and I had real difficulty with it. I looked at it and we had real difficulty just trying to determine if you needed a permit for a 6-foot wall. And so we got one legal opinion you did, we got one legal opinion you didn't, and it was by the same attorney, ours. It was just a little bit difference in geography. So I want to be really careful when we do that. And I would hope that when we go to looking at the adoption, that we can come together with things. I don't like to have rules for things that never happen. Okay, I don't like to build roofs to deflect a meteor, because they do happen and we don't have enough of them to hit the roofs. If we're going to have some things that are going to be really prevalent, and we do have wiring issues here, and we do have shake roof issues here, and we have some other ones, I'd really like us to grab those 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 things, because it's my understanding, rather than making 6 recommendations to the state, that we could make one that included 6 items at one time and just get the thing done faster. Because I really want this to linger for years. The faster we can get the information, the people can read it, understand it, they can opt in or opt out, we can move on. Because this really shouldn't be a big process, and I really don't see where the Building Appeal Board is going to have very many people come before it. I don't think there's going to be very many people that disagree. And we're just going to really try to give you advice on, blighted buildings and some new regulations and things like that. I just don't see a lot of appeals, so that's me. Do we have anybody else that wants to talk on this particular item of the 2013 state code? Dale?
I'm afraid to say anything about it. I pulled it up, I went to the website, and it's extensive. And I'd be very cautious about adopting any part of it until I've had a chance to learn more about it, for the very reasons that you said. I'm afraid we end up with stuff that, I don't know about that, we shouldn't have done that, and you don't know it, and I don't know, Bill, maybe you know better than I do, but I'm very cautious about adopting that without really knowing a lot more about it. That's my feeling.
I'd make the observation that it's my understanding that the state code, that huge body of work, we have to adopt, because the city cannot adopt anything that is lesser than, less comprehensive, less on point than the state code. The issue is whether we're going to be adopting any supplements, any appendix, any additional additions to where we would be either exceeding the state code or adopting portions of that are available on that site or through the state. So at this point, my position is less is more. Adopt what we would want as a community, what we want to adopt, what we have to adopt, which is the state code, and scrupulously review anything that is a supplement or an addition to that that would be beneficial to the community because of our specific topographical, climatological, or geographical considerations, the uniqueness, if you will.
Wendy, do you have any comments?
No, I agreed with that. Because I thought that it was required to be adopted and followed, unless you could never do less, you could do more, so.
Do we have anything from staff? Rob? Steve? Okay, let's go along and try to get this thing wrapped up. So it looks like what we have is future agenda items. And so what I'd like to do at this time.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Number 4, goals.
Oh, that's what I thought I was on, goals.
Agenda items is 6.
Oh, well, we're not going to do that. Goals, number 4. What I would like to hear from, which is going to be the goals, which will be the future agenda items, by the way, because we can't do them now. We can put it any way you want, is I would like to hear from the mayor. And what I would like to hear from the mayor is goals. I would like to hear, if possible, some of the council's goals for the Building Board of Appeals. I believe this. I don't believe we should find work for you to do. It's your job to find work for us to do. And it's your job to tell us which direction to go, and we will do the best we can to provide that work product. and make it as concise as you can, or expand it as much as you want. Please always give us timeframes, because things without dates certain don't get done. And anything you would have to add, I would like to hear.
And I
that.
really appreciate you giving me a clear direction where you would want me to go with my comments. And I don't want to speak outside of my realm and include the council, because to be fair, we have not had a discussion about any commission and where we want them to go down the future, maybe this year, with the whole council. The only thing that we've talked about most recently was last night, and going back over those recommendations that have to do with the guidelines of the second unit compliance. And we gave clear direction to staff that we wanted you to look over the recommendations that you gave for those guidelines, because we quickly understood that you didn't get an opportunity to look at them again. And that to me is, you guys have to look at them before it goes down to us. And whether that was a miscommunication or misunderstanding, whatever it was, I was specific, and I wanted you guys to really be more, have more meat to those checklists, have more clarity, have, again, time certain dates, have more, and thinking back about the guidelines, and the vocabulary was very broad, and narrowing it down so when an applicant comes, they know what to do. And on top of that, recommend possibly, and what we were talking about with the vacant ordinance, enforcement, consequences if they don't go through this program. What are they going to deal with in terms of if they don't comply with the building standards? What should we do? What do you recommend? And that's some clarity that we need as a council to be able to develop a good guidelines, a good second compliance unit. Because the whole idea of this program is to modify those codes so that second units could be non-compliant, so we could add to our arena numbers. And we understand that this is a program that we just want a limited time, and if they don't take advantage of, then we got to start enforcing the current codes on them. And again, what the best approach, what recommendation, that I could give you a confident direction for most of for council, and if Mr. Clark has more to add to that direction, I would offer him to jump in. But in terms of, in general, we do want to work with you. I understand that it's important for council to really brainstorm and give you guys clarity of what the general goals are and how the building appeals board fall into it. But sometimes it's good to hear from you guys. And again, I think that reviewing those state codes and seeing, I just heard Mr. Ulrich, and know he's he's a general contractor and he deals with building codes. That's why I thought he would be excellent on this board, is giving us suggestions that we do need to adopt the state codes, but we don't have to adopt the appendix, the other stuff that comes with the state codes. We got to be very cautious about that, and we have to. So I would urge that if there is some areas that we need to look at, and speaking on myself, is I think that this compliance officers that we have, we need to be strategic in the sense of knowing how to approach ordinances on the books. So if our boards and our commissions are supposed to be council's ears to the public, another group. So if you hear about certain codes, we would appreciate you bringing us that to our attention and adding that to future agendas. So we could start adding, unfortunately, we're going to start adding more to the list, but we need to identify what is more priority and start going through that list and starting. And my hope that by identifying in the most important codes and or ordinances, that it will trickle down and make the other ordinances a lot easier to look at and analyze and modify if we need to do so. So that's my suggestions. I know Councilmember Wyrick is here, so I would invite him up to the podium too to give you his points and directions, because I think it's very appropriate. I'm just one of the people on council, and I don't want to speak outside representing the whole council. So is that clear, or
Yes.
do you have more questions?
Nope, you're very clear,
Yeah. Okay.
and thank you very much
Okay,
for that.
thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Councilman Wyrick.
Mayor Laura spoke comprehensively and eloquently. I don't really have anything to add. Thank you. I don't have anything. I mean, he pretty much covered.
Okay,
You know.
one of my priorities has always been date certain.
Well, yeah, of course.
And so,
And I believe you're seeing, I think we're hearing a lot of that in council, we're hearing a lot of that from the public. Yes, don't leave things open-ended without some sort of performance standard in the form of calendaring. Absolutely. And I think we're getting that message loud and clear. And that means us too. I mean, in terms of commissions and council, we need to all try to, I think, interact in that fashion. With, by this date, can we get this done? I agree.
thank you.
Okay.
And then I guess I would ask staff, since I slaughtered these two together, I'm going to make an assumption, and I'd like a correction. I'm going to make an assumption that we're going to get the information that was given to City Council back to us, and we're going to look at that, and we're going to concur. And what I would ask staff to help us with and help us get agendized is an opportunity to go ahead and start adopting some of these codes that we need to make the second unit compliance program as smooth a transition as possible, and to specify and add clarity to those different points that were put into the submission to the City Council. And I guess I would ask to find out a couple of things. I don't know if this is in our purview, but I don't know when. I made my point about anonymity and the different notices and notifications when people pay their sewer bill. They pay for their hookup. That's a public record. It goes to the assessor's office. And so I really need some clarification of when the decision was made and why not to enforce, and what we're doing with separate applications and those types of things. It's apparent to me that there's going to be there's going to be a statute of limit sometime. The time will run out eventually. I mean, it's going to run out. And then there's going to be some type of an enforcement action. And then there's going to be some type of concessions that the city has offered that will expire. And then there's going to be some type of a date that people are going to start over from the beginning, and they will have missed an opportunity not to put sprinklers in. They will have missed an opportunity maybe to pay the current fee. I mean, a lot of things are going to happen out of this. I want to make sure that we have an ability for everybody to comply in the easiest, simplest, fastest possible manner. so we don't end up having some people on the pier as the ship pulls away and go, we didn't get it. I'm really concerned about that. So I want to make sure that it's very inclusive and we really outreach and we tell them. But I really think that, and I'm going to let the board speak. I think that the era of tolerance and limits is fast running out. This is a very old program, at least on the individual compliance. And so we certainly need that on the future agendas, as many as we need and as much as we can get through. And I really think it would be tolerant, in my opinion, to maybe just have these things last an hour and a half to 2 hours. I think when we blow out of here at 1:45 last night, and I had a couple meetings before, and I had 2 meetings the night before that, and 3 meetings the night. And so, this is like my 8th or 9th meeting, and it's Wednesday. And so, we would kind of like to try to eat that elephant at a small meal at a time. That elephant's too big to swallow. So if you could guide us so we can be the best tools possible to staff and to council in this community, we're looking for that guidance. Okay, so with that, would any of the, Bill, I'll start with you. We'll make it real brief and get out of here, and then we'll turn it back to staff for the final word. Do you have some items that you feel need to be on this future agenda? Besides what we've already discussed, we're gonna get the other stuff back, but what other things do we need to put on here?
Well, at the risk of being redundant.
Pull it up.
At the risk of being redundant, I would say the second unit compliance draft ordinance back for our review. The adoption of the state building codes. Whatever this board will be doing regarding its participation, contribution, or affirmation of that process. Ideally, there would be somewhere in the near future an initiative to generate written checklists for all applications through the Community Development Department, so that there is a formality that the public can be aware of. And then, once again, reiterating what the message from the council was last night, which is enforcement and time limits for enforcement of existing ordinances.
Okay, thank you. Wendy, what would you like to add?
Well, I think that's pretty inclusive, but, and going along with that, finishing a project. Maybe if we see that an item is just going to be very complicated, just schedule that one item for the meeting. Leave everything else for the next meeting, but see it through. Don't leave it hanging from week to week.
Okay, limit the time. Tom?
Well, I think it's important to come out with some kind of a checklist on the second unit compliance program. And more important is come out with maybe, I know I've talked about this several times, but some kind of a brochure. I refer back to the sanitary district when they came out with their amnesty program, and that's what they called it, was an amnesty program. They made it very clear. They came out with a brochure. They put the brochure out, and people read that, and it was pretty self-explanatory, and people did come forward. So I think it's real important that we come out with something that people understand and they can see and they can take home and they can review it and look at it. That's it.
And Dale?
Well, I think that the ombudsman program probably needs to be, I know, speaking with our ombudsman, she's not real clear on exactly what she needs to do, so I think that needs to be finalized. I would really like to see us do something with garage conversions. That was really why this whole thing started, was about garage conversions, and, so far we haven't really settled on that. And I think everything else, there's one other thing, and that's vacation rentals. As it applies to second unit compliance program, I don't think those should be allowed to be vacation rentals. The whole idea of that is to have low-income housing, and if these people are going to turn those units into vacation rentals, they're a blight on our community already, because they've taken up the rentals in this town. And people come in my office every day, they can't find a rental. that's affordable, because they're all becoming anyway. I have a real issue with that, but I think that those, and everything else that was mentioned, I think is very, very good. But we really do have to take those things at a swallow at a time, because we cannot possibly go through, all this and get out of here in a reasonable hour.
Rob?
So, based on what you've said, I think probably your first agenda should be focused completely on that second unit guideline program.
Yeah.
So we can get those out to you very quickly, so you have a lot of time to review them. And you can either feed us comments prior to the meeting or bring them to the meeting, and that'll facilitate the discussion.
Okay.
And when you have discussion with council, we will be willing to meet on a twice-a-month basis to get through this as fast as they need us to get through. Once a month is going to make this thing go on for a horrific amount of time. I'm kind of one of these where if we need to do a giddy up for the next 2-3 months, get caught up, get to speed, get to where we can get out ahead of the sanitary district enforcement. I believe we firmly have to have something in place by the time they take the field, because if not, we're going to be behind playing catch up. So please, you're the executive of the city here, and I would encourage you to talk to council, and we are more than willing to step it up. If you believe that we need to have some workshops on the weekend, which we've done, if you believe we need to go to an ad hoc, if you believe we need to meet with planning, please make all the recommendations you can. Let's see what can work, and let's get out ahead of this. 4 years is too long. I just find myself. Council Wyrick?
Germaine to your discussion, tomorrow 11 a.m. is the ordinance subcommittee meeting of the Ojai Valley Sanitary District, speaking about the lateral ordinance that they're going to be developing, a new one, 11 o'clock tomorrow. Any of you have any issues? I'm going to attend as a liaison. If you have any issues you want me to bring up, Rob, Mr. Stewart, any issues you have, please. I'm offering my services I'll be there. If you have any specific questions you want asked in that format, I'll be more than happy to pose them, excuse me. Anyway, a couple that I had in my mind was, I already mentioned to Mr. Palmer numerous times, I think it's important that the sanitary district be a provider of services to provide, especially if they end up being the low-cost provider for lower laterals in the streets with their inverted sock routine, that technology, if they are geared up with economies of scale and they're the low-cost provider, they should offer those services for cost for people to get their laterals fixed as really a service to the community, as opposed to individual plumbing contractors that may not have that capability. And second of all, I think we're going to have to look at encroachment permits issues, because when if the sanitary district is requiring the owner to be required to handle both upper and lower laterals, which means outside the public in the public property, and then they're going to be looking at a lot of cost to the sanitary district, then they're going to come to us for an encroachment permit, and we need to look at that in terms of whether or not we need to make adjustments for mandates from the sanitary district for lower lateral repair. So those are a couple issues I'm going to bring up, and any others, please let me know.
Thank you. Vince, thank you too for coming. It was a pleasure to meet you. Do we have Sherry?
Did you want to schedule for March 11th? These are the free dates. March 11th, March 25th, April 1st, or April 8th, pardon me.
Let's see, I'm going to be in court March 11th. That looks like a great day.
The
Anybody else have an issue with March 11th? I know court won't go past 5, so that will be our Ojai Flow Water appeals. So I guess, Sherry, it's going to be the 11th. Anybody else have any comments or business or anything else to say tonight? Thank you very, very much for all being here. We appreciate it.
I don't know how you do it.
see you in every single one.
I'm exhausted.
You're a new code compliance officer?